This is the BBC. For details of our complete range of programmes, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the latest global news, recorded at 14 hours GMT on Monday, the 8th of January. I'm Jonathan Blake with a selection of highlights from across BBC World Service News today. Coming up, fears of an environmental disaster after an oil tanker crashed into a cargo ship in the East China Sea.
In terms of how explosive it is, there is a real concern that this ship could simply keep burning and burning and at some point explode and then sink.
The red carpet turns black as stars speak out about sexual harassment at the Golden Globe Awards.
For too long, women have not been heard or believed if they dared to speak their truth to the power of those men. But their time is up.
A study finds fewer women would die from heart attacks if they were given the same treatment as men.
In women, more likely we'll get more atypical symptoms such as a sharp or stabbing pain in the chest, but even breathlessness or fatigue or palpitations.
The case of the teenage Palestinian protester charged after slapping and kicking 2 Israeli soldiers outside her home.
While Palestinians liken her to Joan of Arc, Israel's media calls her Shirley Temper.
And later, why it's Divorce Day in the UK. It's 2 days now since an oil tanker collided with a cargo ship in the East China Sea. And if you've seen any of the pictures that have emerged of the tanker on fire, you won't be surprised that there are now fears it could cause an environmental disaster. Chinese officials say the Sanchi, which was carrying $60 million worth of Iranian oil, could explode and sink. Our correspondent Robin Brandt is following the story from Shanghai.
Well, the volume of oil on board Sanchi is vast, almost 1 million barrels of oil, and this has the potential to be the biggest spill of its kind since 1991. And as things stand at the moment, this fire has been burning on board this vessel for 2 nights. The search and rescue operation continues. There is an element of containment going on. The China Foreign Ministry saying teams there have managed to clean some of the spilled oil already, but this fire continues, and the huge concern is that the boat could sink and take what's left of the cargo to the floor of the East China Sea.
And the rescue effort now an international one.
Yes, so the Chinese are leading with, we understand, 4 boats, I think 3 aircraft. The South Koreans are contributing some aircraft and vessels as well. Remember, it was South Korea where Sanchi was heading with this cargo of oil, and an American aircraft has been involved as well. But this is very much a Chinese effort. Remember, this collision happened, and the fire continues to burn on this boat just about 200 miles off the eastern coast of where I'm talking to you from at the moment. And I have to say, we're into the 3rd day now of this rescue operation, and I think increasingly the fate of the crew members that remain missing is looking very grim.
And the type of oil that was on board the ship is presenting a particular challenge, is that right?
Yes, I mean, you know, the layman among us will assume this is the thick, heavy, sludgy type crude oil that we've seen in oil spills in the past coming out of tankers. That's not the case with Sanchi. It was carrying what's known as condensate. This is a heavily refined, far less dense liquid. It is odourless, it is colourless, it is far more explosive. So those things present 2 big problems there for the rescuers. That's firstly trying to see where the oil's gone, gauge the extent of the spill, and in terms of how explosive it is, there is a real concern that this ship could simply keep burning and burning and at some point explode and then sink.
Robin Brandt. Second only to the Oscars, the Golden Globes is one of Hollywood's biggest nights of the year. But in 2018, the award ceremony was more protest than party. Stars took the opportunity to speak out about the abuse scandal that's dominated the film industry since one of its most powerful men, the producer Harvey Weinstein, was accused of sexual assault last year. Since then, accusations have piled up and star after star has fallen. From Los Angeles, James Cook reports.
The red carpet was flooded with black dresses and sober thoughts, a show of solidarity for those who'd been abused and harassed, and a demonstration of the determination to change. The star of The Crown, Claire Foy, gave that sentiment voice.
It is a show of solidarity, and it's not about what we're wearing, it's about what we've got to say and who we are. And it's also a message to everyone around the world. It's just about saying, look, we're all in it together.
Beauty and the Beast star Emma Watson was one of several actresses who arrived with an activist as their guest, stressing that the problem went beyond film.
You know, Mara that I both wanted to stand behind this movement that says time's up on violence against women and girls and the imbalance of power across all industries, not just my industry, not just Hollywood.
Ashley Judd and Salma Hayek, two of Harvey Weinstein's most prominent accusers, arrived together.
Our industry helps create culture, and when our industry does internal housekeeping and wants to eradicate inequality in hostile workplaces, we send a message that we take that seriously, and we can finally put sexual harassment in the way past where it should have been a long time ago.
Is that happening? Human rights. It is happening. 4 months ago, you couldn't have dreamed of a night like this and the conversations that are being had.
Welcome to the 75th Annual Golden Globe Awards.
From the moment the ceremony began, the tone was set.
Hello, everyone! Welcome! Good evening, ladies and remaining gentlemen.
Natalie Portman highlighted the failure of the Golden Globes to recognise female directors.
And here are the all-male nominees.
If looks could kill, the members of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association would have been in trouble. And Ms. Portman was not alone. Laura Dern won for the TV series Big Little Lies.
May we teach our children that speaking out without the fear of retribution is our culture's new North Star.
I don't know what the police are doing. I hadn't heard a word from them in 7 goddamn months. I'll tell you this, I've heard an awful lot from them since I put them billboards up.
The most successful film of the night was about the abuse of women and a mother's fight for justice. 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri picked up 4 awards, including Best Actress for its star, Frances McDormand.
It was really great to be in this room tonight and to be a part of the tectonic shift in our industry's power structure.
But no speech was more powerful than Oprah Winfrey's.
For too long, women have not been heard or believed if they dared to speak their truth to the power of those men. But their time is up. Their time is up.
Oprah Winfrey with her powerful speech at the Golden Globes, ending that report by James Cook. And a row about equal pay here at the BBC, sparked by Carrie Gracie's resignation as China editor, also came up at the ceremony. The British actor Emma Watson, who we heard from briefly in James's report there, said that it showed more needed to be done.
We need to be holding these organisations accountable, and I think that, you know, what has happened tonight with that resignation is a really good example that you've got to follow through. You've got to back up what you're saying, and it's important, and we will hold you accountable. We really will.
Carrie Gracie took action after it emerged the BBC's 2 male international editors earned tens of thousands of dollars more than their 2 female counterparts. The corporation offered her a pay rise from just over $180,000 to $240,000, but she insisted she wasn't interested in more money.
I didn't feel that it was a solution. I felt it was a divide and rule botched solution that would not make the BBC better. And I do love the BBC. I've been in the BBC for more than 30 years. This is my professional family. I want it to be the best. Every day I go out without fear or favour, facing intimidation in China, facing censorship, and actually telling the story and shining a light. I'm not going to not shine a light when I find a problem in my home organisation that needs saying.
What did they actually say to you, Carrie, though? As you say, they did offer you more money. What did they say, and how did it not help?
I didn't want more money. Do you understand? I wanted equality, and this was not equality. There was still a big gap between myself and my male peers. To me, this was an exercise in understanding how the BBC approached pay. And at the end of the exercise, I felt the BBC was not approaching pay in an appropriate way. The pay system was neither equal nor fair, nor was it transparent. And I thought all of that needed to change.
Carrie Gracie speaking to Jane Martinson. Our arts correspondent Vincent Dowd explained how the BBC responded.
the BBC has issued a statement. I'll read most of it. It's fairly brief. Fairness in pay is vital. A significant number of organisations have now published their gender pay figures, showing that we, the BBC, are performing considerably better than many and are well below the national average, meaning in gender disparity. We've already conducted an independent audit of pay for rank and file staff, in other words, not people who are on air, which showed, quotes, no systemic discrimination against women. So that's rather a general statement, but I suppose you wouldn't expect the BBC to indulge in great detail about Carrie Grace's particular case at the moment.
And her resignation has caused quite a stir here, unsurprisingly, and it is part of a wider movement here in the UK and around the world. We were hearing there from Hollywood at the Golden Globes, an effort to highlight potential gender discrimination. What other examples are there of that?
No, absolutely. Here in the UK, in the last 9 months to a year, it's become rather a political hot topic. There's a national move intended to highlight the worst cases of inequality and encourage employers to pay greater attention to inequalities in salaries. So the BBC report, for instance, which was issued 6 months ago, points out that it had a gender pay gap, as revealed in that review, of 9.3% against a national average of 18.1%. Now, I know these statistics get a bit indigestible, but the BBC's point is that it made its report much earlier than it's supposed to, because most organisations will do that in April this year, and that although there is a gender pay gap, it's somewhat less than we see in other organisations nationally.
Vincent Dowd. Confrontations between young Palestinian and Israeli soldiers happened almost daily in the occupied West Bank. But since last month, one case has attracted more attention than most. Ahed Tamimi, who's 16, was filmed slapping and kicking two soldiers outside her home. She's now been charged with 5 counts of assault. Yolande Nell reports.
Get out, a Palestinian teenager tells 2 armed soldiers standing by her family's yard. She pushes them and one swats her away. Then she slaps and kicks them with her older cousin. The Israeli soldiers don't react, and Ahed Tamimi's mother intervenes. This video clip went viral on social media. Last month, Ahed was arrested. She's been charged with assault, but her lawyer, Gabi Lasky, sees her trial taking on extra significance.
For a long time, Israelis were not dealing with occupation. They were not talking about it. And you have to confront yourself while you're saying, okay, people that are occupied, do they have a right to fight occupation? Yes or not? And how is the best way to do it?
But this isn't the first time Ahed's actions have sparked debate. 2 years ago, she was a blonde, curly-haired child filmed biting an Israeli soldier trying to detain her brother. In an earlier video, aged 11, she threatens to punch a soldier. Israeli MP Anat Berko accuses the Tamimis of making anti-Israeli propaganda.
Now when she's in jail, I think that she's going to pay the price, and it's a very high price, and I'm very sorry that the family didn't stop this behavior. The motivation is to be provocative, and our brave soldiers did not react to this provocative behavior of the Tamimi girl.
I meet Ahed's father, a political activist who's been jailed by Israel many times. For years, he's organised protests in which villagers try to march towards land taken by an Israeli settlement. Settlements are considered illegal under international law, but Israel disagrees. Usually, the marches lead to clashes with Israeli soldiers. But Bassem Tamimi always allowed his daughter to join them and be filmed.
I am proud of my daughter. I am happy that she became the spirit and the symbol of the new generation for resistance. They said it's a movie or it's a theatre. How we can bring these soldiers to our home to make this play?
A few hundred Palestinian children are prosecuted in this system each year. Maurice Hirsch used to be the IDF chief prosecutor for the West Bank. He says the more serious charges against Ahed involved her alleged online call for more action to support the Palestinian cause, from protests to what she calls martyrdom operations.
Attacking a soldier is a crime of violence, but I think that's really one of the sidelines of the indictment. One of the main counts of the indictment is really incitement, publicly calling for others to commit other terrorist attacks.
The other women seen in this video are both charged with assault and her mother with incitement after it was live streamed on her Facebook page. Their case will be watched closely, not just for its legal outcome, but for all that it's seen to symbolise.
Yolande Nell with that report. You're listening to Global News, the most important stories and the best interviews and on-the-spot reporting from the BBC World Service. Every weekend, you can hear a review of the week's main news stories and why they matter. That's in the world this week. And the programme is also available to download from our website. Go to bbc.co.uk/programmes. Our next story is from Tanzania, where 5 pregnant schoolgirls and their parents have been arrested. The authorities said it was part of an effort to end student pregnancies, but human rights activists say the men who got them pregnant should have been arrested instead. After much public pressure, the authorities have dropped the charges. Our Africa editor Mary Harper says teen pregnancy is widespread in Tanzania.
It's a big problem in Tanzania, especially in this part of the country where these girls were arrested. And rights groups say that about 15,000 girls every year drop out of school because they're pregnant. And a local survey said that more than a quarter of all young women between the ages of 15 and 19 are either pregnant or have already had their first child. So it is a big issue in Tanzania. And it's also quite widespread in other African countries where you get very young girls. They're preyed upon by older men who sometimes offer to pay their school fees, buy them their school books, help them in other ways, or even help their families financially. And then they end up getting these young girls pregnant, and they're left in a very desperate situation, often completely rejected by their families as well as the man who got them pregnant.
And how influential has the president been?
President of Tanzania, President John Magufuli, he caused some outrage about this subject last year when he said that any schoolgirl who got pregnant should not be allowed to return to school once she'd had her baby, because this would be a distraction. It would distract her away from her studies. And there is a pattern. The president has been fairly repressive towards journalists, anybody in a church or on social media who criticise him in any way has been threatened with arrest or being shut down. So he is proving rather a repressive president, even though there was great joy when he was elected because he came into power on an anti-corruption ticket.
Mary Harper. Women are more likely to die than men in the year after having a heart attack because they're not given the same treatment. That's according to new research by scientists here in the UK and in Sweden. One of the authors of the study, Professor Chris Gale of the University of Leeds, said the difference in women's symptoms could contribute.
Women are more likely to present with more unusual symptoms of heart attack. So even though the typical heart attack would be central crushing chest pain that may radiate to the arms or to the neck, in women more likely we'll get more atypical symptoms such as a sharp or stabbing pain in the chest, but even breathlessness or fatigue or palpitations. And it can be these symptoms that we don't necessarily associate with a heart attack that are important and that can delay the seeking of care, but also the provision of care. And that can then be associated with more adverse outcomes.
Well, the BBC's health reporter Katie Silver told me more about the research.
The study analysed 180,000 Swedish people who had heart attacks over a 10-year period in the early 2000s. And basically what it looked like was they were looking at whether or not women were receiving the same treatments as per the treatment guidelines as men. And they found that they weren't. They were much less likely to receive it. In one specific heart condition, they were less likely to receive procedures which cleared blocked arteries, such as bypass surgery or stents. They were less likely to receive things like statin medication or aspirins, which can help prevent blood clots. And this is despite the guidelines suggesting that both genders should receive this treatment. And what it was associated with was a greater likelihood of dying in the year afterwards. And when they did receive the treatment according to the guidelines, this difference decreased dramatically. So they were almost on par after that.
So why weren't women getting the right treatment? Is it partly because heart attacks are seen in many countries as largely a male-focused problem?
That's exactly it. So you've nailed it on the head. So there's this stereotype of a middle-aged man who smokes, is overweight, has diabetes, and that's the idea that's what people think of when they think of someone as having a heart attack. But for example, here in the UK, a third of the 210,000 patients every year who have a heart attack are actually women. So it's this stereotype that's the issue.
Any suggestions as to how this imbalance can be addressed?
Well, the good thing is in theory, it should be quite easy. It's just a matter of changing perceptions. So, the British Heart Foundation, for example, is very positive about it. They say if we can increase awareness both amongst practitioners and sort of the general population, that this difference occurs and that heart attacks need to be seen as, gender neutral, then there might be an improved outcome for women.
Katie Silver there. Now, January the 8th. Christmas, for those celebrating it, is a distant memory. The new year has begun and most people are back to work, if indeed they had any time off in the first place. And it's known here in the UK as Divorce Day because lawyers apparently receive more inquiries from people thinking about getting divorced from their spouses than on any other day of the year. To explain why, here's Richard Hamilton.
A survey by the legal firm Slater and Gordon found that 37% of couples said the biggest challenge they faced was financial pressure, especially over Christmas. But another reason is mistrust. The survey revealed that 27% had kept some kind of cheating hidden from their partner. Lorraine Harvey is an expert on family law at Slater and Gordon.
I think, new year, new start, people make decisions. If they're in unhappy relationships, it's time to move on. And I think Christmas is a particularly difficult time for some families who are already going through marriage problems. It's a stressful period and the TV is full of adverts showing the idyllic family Christmas, when the reality is that it can be a particularly stressful time for some families. It can add a lot of financial pressures in a marriage, if particularly one of the parties isn't budgeting for Christmas. And I think January, when you're stuck with credit card bills and perhaps one of the parties is overspent over Christmas, that it can cause problems in a marriage.
She adds that as well as the sometimes nauseating Christmas television adverts, social media is also making couples feel dissatisfied. No one, she says, willingly broadcasts their unhappiness via Facebook or Instagram, but plenty put smiling selfies of themselves on a beach in the Caribbean. January the 8th is not, however, Divorce Day everywhere. Variations in different countries reflect different cultures, attitudes and climates. While January is known as Divorce Month in the US, in Spain and Portugal, couples start to think about uncoupling in the heat of August. In France, it tends to be in May. And in Germany, the peak time to separate is February, more precisely on Valentine's Day.
Richard Hamilton. There's something of a revolution going on in the way African countries get their electricity. Traditional fossil fuels are being replaced by solar and wind power. These renewable sources have brought power to rural communities that would probably never have been connected to the traditional grid. Andrew Harding reports from Zambia.
A flooded stream, a broken bridge, and a solitary figure wading through the swirling water with a bright yellow box on her head.
It was frightening. So it's like the bridge is not able to hold all the water, so the water is going upland.
We're deep in rural Zambia, where Judith Setwala has started work as a solar power saleswoman. A local farmer, Cosmos Kanyongona, has ordered one of Judith's kits. He gets his son to clamber onto the roof to install the solar panel. Inside the dark farmhouse, a box full of software allows Judith's company to make its profit by charging a monthly fee for the first 18 months.
After 1 year, 6 months, you have free electricity.
Because normally people use candles or kerosene.
Yeah.
And it's expensive, isn't it?
Yes, it's expensive, and others use those lamps which you need to buy battery, and it's very expensive to buy batteries each and every time.
So with these, the idea is that you pay off the cost of the unit within 18 months.
Yes.
And then it's yours.
Yes.
So you have free electricity.
After 1 year, 6 months, you have free electricity.
The idea of a technological leap is not new in Africa. I've come to a market in Zambia's capital, Lusaka. Every other stall seems to be catering to the mobile phone industry. So everybody has a mobile phone?
Almost everyone has.
Almost everybody. The speed and the success of the mobile phone revolution in Africa has been extraordinary. It's transformed this continent, and it's made a lot of other businesses start to think, why can't we do the same? For Zambia, solar power makes enormous sense. It's a large, poor country that simply can't afford to expand the traditional national grid. Only 4% of rural homes are currently connected.
My name is Geoffrey Msonda. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Rural Electrification Authority. If we are not going to embark on off-grid solutions, it will take us centuries to reach everyone. So we strongly feel our government has made the right decision to promote off-grid. This is the way to go. And of course, the demand for power is also growing every day.
In a way, it's a surprise the solar industry hasn't been quicker off the mark on this sun-drenched continent. But today, private investors are moving in, not least in South Africa, which has seen a surge of new wind and solar plants.
I'm Tobias Bischoff-Niemz. I'm the head of energy research at the CSIR, that's the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Pretoria. We see the continent being electrified not on the basis of large central power stations with large transmission grid, but rather on the basis of smaller microgrids. Probably in the next 5 years we will see, after we have seen the economic tipping point, I think the mindset tipping point will now occur, and then the doors are open for mass rollout of these technologies.
And back in rural Zambia, and Cosmos's family have gathered in the house to wait for the moment when the light comes on. One happy customer on a continent now seeking to leapfrog into the future.
Andrew Harding with an electrical revolution in Africa. And that's all from us now, but an updated version of the Global News podcast will be available for you to download later. And if you want to comment on the podcast or any of the topics we cover, you can, of course, send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I'm Jonathan Blake. Until next time, goodbye.